Before we dig into the details, Chris, I wanted to ask you, it's been a difficult summer for a long period of time. I think it's fair to say the midfield rebuild and sort of the unrest amongst the fan base, and we've had many conversations about what we want to happen, what we think may happen, how we think it's going. We've really dug deep into it as well at times. But right here, right now, obviously just signed Gravenberch. There's a matter of hours left in the window, really. We really are counting down now. Just on this deal, before we do dig into it in more detail, your general happiness with it, you made up?
It's going up. It's going up, certainly. I've surprised myself, really, because I've been like all over the place in terms of like, I've been really high, I've been really low at times, and it's not taken much to knock me from one to the other at the moment. And I think, you know, it probably stems from, if we go back to the Henderson and the Fabinho thing, and I remember sitting there with you, and I think it was Paul at the time, and I had quite a different opinion. I felt it was an opportunity for Liverpool to grasp, and as the weeks come on, you sitting there going, this is terrible, as kind of like, I've just sort of slowly and surely, and not very slowly, quite quickly got to your point of view. And I'm just sort of like, I just hate wasted opportunities. It really annoys me. And I felt like Liverpool were just going to maybe waste this opportunity to get better once we'd sold Henderson and Fabinho. And I think if I was just in a room on my own, and maybe even I was just in the office with you guys and all that type of stuff, I'd feel a lot better for it. But we get this constant, like, sometimes pressure from outside sources of their opinions, you know, doing live shows almost every day, and everybody just got constantly in the comments like, we need to sign someone, it's not good enough. Even now I'm seeing them, he's not a six, he's not good enough, and it's trying to block out that noise at times, isn't it? And it's like pushing it away and going, no, he's not a six. But then 2 weeks ago, James Pearce came out and said Liverpool went in for a six now. They're in for a versatile midfielder. And if that's what Liverpool's plan is, then this is a perfect signing. Yeah. Because he is a versatile midfielder who's got absolutely everything on his side. You know, he's got the age on his side, he's got experience on his side, he's got that versatility, athleticism, technical ability. He's got everything that Liverpool want in a versatile midfielder. And now he's got Jurgen Klopp to mould him into the play that we need.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I completely agree with you. But it is easy, especially, like I say, seeing what we see day in, day out. It is easy to sort of get dragged down a little bit by it and be negative and sort of realise, like, yeah, maybe it isn't perfect. And obviously we had the Caicedo and Lavia saga that kind of meant we had to change our own thought processes as well. It's been difficult, but like you say, I think sort of later than we would have liked.
Definitely.
But ultimately, you know, we get the player, the type of player. You're right, Liverpool look like they've executed the plan actually quite well in the end, because it wasn't too long ago Melissa Reddy came out and said they want a destroyer type and a more progressive type. Well, Gravenberch. Endo may well not be the one that we all hoped and dreamed of early on the window, but if he comes in and does a job, sound, happy days. I want to touch on sort of your overall marking of the rebuild a little bit later, but before we do, I want to touch on the positives of this. You mentioned a couple there in terms of Gravenberch's talent, his potential, his ceiling, his versatility, that type of stuff as well. But for me, it's the fact that Liverpool really want him. Jurgen Klopp clearly really wants him.
3 years.
Exactly. And I want to speak to you in particular about sort of how he's going to fit into the side a little bit. But do you envisage a world whereby Jurgen Klopp changes this lad into something we haven't seen yet? Because we've seen him do it before with Cody Gakpo. We've seen him do it with other players, Gini Wijnaldum a little bit as well, because Wijnaldum arrived as...
Perfect example.
Yeah, he arrives as a goal-scoring, sort of attacking threat from Newcastle, who chipped in with quite a lot of goals. He still did that for Holland. Every time he went away on international duty, he scored goals. Come back to Liverpool and just be this facilitator in the middle. Do you see something similar happening with Gravenberch potentially?
Definitely. I've adopted this sort of phrase that I heard on an NFL podcast that I listen to. Use it a lot at this time of the year for fantasy football and stuff like that. And the phrase is, it's within the possible range of outcomes. And I really like it, because it's like, I'm not committed to it. I'm not committed.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely within the range of outcomes. And it's not just Cody Gakpo, and it's not just Gini Wijnaldum. It is, for me, Bobby Firmino wasn't the player that he ended up being. Sadio Mane, at the end of his Liverpool career, wasn't the player that he was at the start of his Liverpool career. Kurt Jones, when he broke through to the side, tricky winger. Harvey Elliott, right winger, centre midfielder. He's almost done it with everybody now. I mean, Trent Alexander-Arnold, best right back in the world. Now he's being moved into a midfielder. So I don't mean to be non-committal on this, but he's done it loads, so you can totally understand that he'd do it again. And physically, I think that he's got absolutely everything to be a Fabinho if you just look at his build and everything else. But I think in his heart he wants to play further up the field, and I think that's going to be a struggle with Szoboszlai and with McAllister. But then, what's Szoboszlai? Is he a 10 now? Does he become a right winger? I've started to think over the last couple of days, and bear with me on this one because I realise that this is way out there and no one's talking about this, right? But it came from the deep dive me and Josh did with on Darwin last week, and I'm just starting to wonder to myself, like, do you need an inverted right winger if Núñez is going to be the tip of the spear, or can you get someone who goes like an old school winger to the byline, cut the ball back or whip the ball in for your striker to run onto? So I think there's definitely a chance that Szoboszlai is used on that right hand side to back up Salah at times. Certainly I think he'll for the majority be used as an 8 and stuff. So Gravenberch can play where McAllister plays, where Szoboszlai plays, where Thiago has played, or where Fabinho has played as well. So they're the sort of 3 that I'm sort of thinking at the moment. But it wouldn't surprise me if no one's put the finger on exactly what he's going to do, because he's not going to move for no minutes.
No.
And it feels like we're getting Endo in. We really want Andre to play that number 6 role as well. So where's the free spot? And I can't see a free spot, to be honest, at the moment, with Salah in situ and Diaz in situ and Darwin or Jota in situ, Trent and potentially Robertson or somebody else. I don't think he's going to play centre half, although that might be the free spot. So I'm a little bit like, when you're on like Command and Conquer, and you get to see a little bit of the plan at the time as you move your troops around, and it's all shrouded. I feel like we've seen quite a lot, but there's still areas of the map that's undercover.
Well, is the beauty of him, there's a couple of beauties of this transfer which I'll touch on now. One of them, so probably the standout one actually, is the fee, which we're not 100% nailed down on just yet, but it's ranging between sort of the 30 million to the 35 million mark. So that in itself is a bargain, essentially, because we touched on it, his potential is absolutely astronomical. Liverpool wanted him whilst he was at Ajax. He's shown what he was all about at Ajax. It hasn't worked for him at Bayern Munich for obvious reasons, but you touched on it there. He's not going to move for no minutes, because the reason this transfer is happening is because he hasn't played enough football. 3 Bundesliga starts last season, 10-minute cameo this season so far. So there should be sort of conversations or promises to a certain extent made about how much football he's going to play. So is the beauty of him then in the system that we're currently adopting the fact that he does play all them positions you just mentioned there, the 6, both 8s, possibly even a little bit more further advanced, because I've seen an interview with Thomas Tuchel talking about him not as a midfielder but sort of third in the pecking order behind Thomas Muller and Jamal Musiala, which is fascinating to me because they clearly seen him as a much more advanced player, whereas it looks like Liverpool see him as a deeper player potentially. The double pivot becomes an option. So to me, as much as you're right, if you're pigeonholing him, you look at Endo as your 6, McAllister and Szoboszlai are your 8s. But because he's all of them things, he'll get his minutes along the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But that's the thing where there's 2 schools of thought there for me. Is yes, he's going to get minutes in all of those positions. I can totally get behind all of that. But the other part of it is, if you're learning your trade, I think you need time in those positions at the same point. And you're not going to come in and be great in 3 or 4 different positions from the beginning. It's only when you get to the back end of the career where I think, for any footballer, to be honest with you, like James Milner's a classic example. It's Jordan Henderson, not quite as good an example, but they become good in those positions through their experience and their knowledge of the system. You know, I think Henderson became a good 6 when the year we won the league, because he's watched Fabinho do it. Prior to Fabinho joining, I don't think Hendo was a very good 6, but then all of a sudden you understand where they're supposed to be when you've got the ball as an 8, and then you know through your knowledge of your position where they're supposed to be. And I think that's a difficult thing for a young player coming into a side. You learn in a system, but you need to learn almost 4 positions in a system. Well, it can take time. It can take a year or 2 to learn your position. You know, you don't want to be thinking on the football field, do you? If you're thinking on the football field, you're behind. You're a second behind. You need to be instinctive and know your role. So there is a part of me that thinks he's going to come in and he might do 3 months in a certain position, and then he might maybe if he's shown a willingness to learn, move around. But I don't see him getting minutes that way. So and then I'm back to what you've just said.
No, absolutely, yeah. And it's a really difficult one, but like I say, clearly we've identified, basically the way I look at it, and Neil Jones said something similar to me earlier on this week, is it's essentially an opportunity, and it's an opportunity Liverpool can't afford to pass up because we have admired him from afar for so long. We've clearly looked at our situation, looked at his skill set and what he can bring to the squad, not necessarily a position, but the squad, and gone, if he becomes available for anything like the price that I've just suggested, we just have to act on it. Because kind of worst case scenario in all of this is it doesn't work to whatever degree, and you can probably still sell him for what you paid for him anyway, or sort of at worst a little bit of a hit on it.
Well, look, Bayern Munich have nearly doubled the money.
Exactly, and that's
and he hasn't played 6 starts.
Exactly, that's because he's 21 and his ceiling remains so high. Now, what his next move? We don't want to sort of bin him off straight away, but what his next move would be after that is in question, of course. But for me, it just feels like a win-win situation for Liverpool. But I wanted to ask you, it got put to me a few times, I've seen it said in a few different places, obviously you were pretty certain Thiago will leave next summer. That feels nailed on to me. What are your thoughts on him as sort of the understudy stroke replacement for that role?
I don't even know what role that is.
Well, it's very similar to what we're saying, I guess, isn't it? He might do a little bit of the 6, he can do a little bit of the 8, but in terms of stylistically, I guess, do you see the similarities there at all?
Yeah, I do. I think, you know, I think Thiago's a better passer of the football. Thiago's a lot more mobile and a lot more tenacious, I feel, than people give him credit for at time. And that's the one thing that I'm really yet to see from Gravenberch, is that tenacity. And whether he's got that in his locker. But that's the one thing that I think and it's it, isn't it? The coaching staff know better than us, don't they, at the end of the day? So I certainly feel like he can do that role. He'll definitely be fitter, hopefully for longer, than Thiago. And then he's got, if that's the role that Jurgen's pigeonholed him for, then he's got a year of watching one of the absolute best in the world do it. And that's always a good thing, isn't it?